Hey fishy people, I wanted to do a breakdown on substrates today, and the whole dirt bottom approach, or soil bottom more correctly, and how it works. Also talk about a couple of different products. So substrate wise, and plants, I guess plants, how they feed. You've got a couple different types of plants. You have aerial feeders, which are the ferns, your anubis, your mosses. They'll absorb nutrients directly from the water column. They don't need to feed through their roots. Anubis will sometimes feed through their roots, but it's not nearly as important. And most of the time when they're absorbing through their roots, it's more similar to absorbing through a leaf due to the properties of their roots. They're slightly different than standard other plant roots. Your crypts, your swords, your apons, your pretty much everything else, they're root feeders, and you can feed them foliarly. When you're doing EI dosing and you just have a standard gravel substrate, that's what you're doing. You're foliarly feeding your plants. They're not really absorbing much nutrients from their roots because most of those nutrients are getting down there. There's not much water flow down there in their roots and in the gravel, and the gravel is not a conductor of nutrients, so they're mostly feeding through their leaves, which is fine, and it works great, as you know, a lot of people with really nice show tanks can prove, but it's not necessarily how the plants would like to feed. The root feeders would prefer to feed through their roots. That's why they're called root feeders. And with a soil bottom substrate and using products like EcoComplete or fluorite or laterite, you can feed these leaf feeders through their roots. The big deal with these different substrates is that they have a very high cation exchange capacity, a very high CEC, and that means that they're charged. And that's important because the nutrients you're feeding to your plants are all charged. They're all salts. They've mostly all got a negative charge to them. And they're not available to the plants until they're charged. Plants need to absorb something that's charged, has an ion imbalance. And what these substrates with a high CEC do is they bind those charged particles. So the nitrates that you're dosing, even if you're adding a liquid fertilizer, will bind with the laterite and the fluorite and the EcoComplete, and they'll be held and retained in the substrate down at the root zone until the plants are ready to pull those substances off and use them, which means the plants can root feed, which is pretty important. Especially nitrogen, not so much a big deal, because nitrogen is very, very water soluble. It's readily absorbed through the leaves. But potassium and phosphorus and a lot of the trace minerals and heavy metals that plants like really are not all that mobile in the water column, and they need to be down there at the plant roots to be absorbed. So there's definitely a big advantage to using the EcoComplete, the fluorite, and the laterite products. That being said, there's an alternative. You can do a soil bottom tank. And a soil bottom tank has several advantages. For one, the soil itself is amended. Preferably you'd use organic soil, and it has organic amendments. And these are different than fertilizer. Fertilizer is immediately available for the most part. It's in a charged state. It's water soluble. It can be absorbed by the plants right away. Amendments are ingredients that hold the nutrients. The nutrients aren't immediately available. The amendments need to be broken down. They're broken down by fungi and by bacteria, and they're slowly released and made available to the plants over time as they're broken down through the process of mineralization. So soil is great because it provides fertilizer to your plants. Laterite, fluorite, EcoComplete, it's loaded with iron, some trace minerals. To a degree, it starts out with some nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are your big three nutrients that plants really need. But that wears off pretty fast, and you have to keep charging that. You have to use root tabs, or you've got to use a liquid-based product that binds to the substrate, but they're not there to provide the actual fertilizer or the actual nutrients. Soil provides the actual nutrients. That being said, soil, at least what a lot of people are using, it's like potting mixes, is not so much soil. Soil is sand, silt, and clay. Potting mixes are mostly organic matter, and a lot of the organic matter has a high CEC and can bind nutrients, but not nearly as great as clay. And it doesn't really have the texture you want for a lot of aqueous plants. Aqueous plants like a sandy, silty, clay mixture more than just straight organic matter for the most part. So what a lot of people do is they'll take like a Miracle-Gro Organic, which is mostly just organic matter, very, very little sand or silt, which is why it's very light, and if you look at it, there's very little clay, sand, or silt in it. It's not very dense either. And they'll cap that with laterite, fluorite, or Eco-Complete, which is great because laterite, fluorite, and Eco-Complete are mostly just clay. And even the ADA soil, aqua soil, is just an expanded clay product. And clay is great because it has a high CEC. So when the soil releases its nutrients, it's captured by the fluorite or Eco-Complete or laterite or aqua soil that's on top, and is still held down there. Another option, though, which is what I like to do, is I take soil and I go out and I dig up some silt and I dig up some clay and I mix it all together. And that way, it's all bound in the soil. All the nutrients are immediately bound up. And I can just cap it with a really cheap sand, and nothing is going to get away. It's not going to just escape from my soil because my soil doesn't have a high enough CEC and float into the water column and get flushed out with my water changes. It's going to get bound up directly into the soil because of the clay and because of how high the CEC is in the clay. And I can top it with sand and it's no big deal. And a lot of plants really like sand as an initial rooting point, and it's a great cap. It's nice and heavy, it holds plants down, which is my preference. But definitely, if you have the money and if you're just going the Miracle-Gro route, a cap with Eco-Complete or fluoride is great. But I definitely would recommend doing a cap if you're not amending a store-bought potting mixture with clay. Of course, there are recipes online on how to amend it with a kaolinite clay organic cat litter, which is awesome. Kaolinite clay has one of the highest cation exchange capacities of all the clays, and definitely try and do that if you're going to go that route. But yeah, that was the basics, I guess. I'll probably keep elaborating on this, and I'll try and post some pictures probably of just how exactly these ion exchanges happen. This will probably be the first of a couple videos, but I hope it's somewhat helpful. And, correct me if you find any mistakes that I made, but I believe I'm pretty dead on most of this stuff. So, yeah, hope it was helpful. Hope everyone's tanks are doing well. Until next time, bye guys.